Ladies and gentlemen, what you have before you now is Microsoft Excel. This is the 2007 version. What you're looking at home, if you don't have the 07, you have the 03 or the 2000, maybe slightly different. You'll be able to figure it out using this as your base. Okay, so the first step is what you need to do. You need to import these variables, this data set, into an Excel spreadsheet. 3 variables: year, average global CO2 levels, average global temperature in degrees Celsius. This is important. Your data is organized by column. The first thing you need to do is click on Insert. Then you need to select 2 variables, and I just selected year and average global CO2 levels. You'll see why we do that in just a moment. Click on a line graph. You can use any of these, and in fact I encourage you to play with different graphs, see how you like them, and just work with it. I'm just going to take the first one for simplicity's sake. So now what we have before us is a graph showing this random set of numbers on the y-axis and this random set of numbers on the x-axis, and it really tells us nothing other than we have 2 relatively flat lines. What we need to do is start talking to Excel and telling Excel what we want it to do. So move your mouse inside the chart area, right click, move down to select data. Okay, so now you'll see that chart data range right here corresponds with the data that has been selected over here. You'll see that under legend series or legend entries here, this refers to the things that are being graphed along your y-axis, and the horizontal axis refers to the things that are being graphed along your x-axis. The first problem we have is that our x-axis is distributed along this 1 through 15 column. That's not what we want. So we're going to click Edit. And now Excel is asking us, what is the label range that we want? So in other words, what numbers do we want to be in our x-axis? And the numbers that we want are right here. So go ahead and highlight those. You see that they show up where you want them. Click OK. Click OK. So now we have a graph that has the appropriate x-axis. Our y-axis is still wrong, so we need to fix that. So back into the chart area, right click, select data. Over here we have year and average global CO2 levels. The year is already over here. We don't need that, so we're going to remove that. And so now when we click OK, we see that our graph looks a little more representative of what it should look like. We have a number range that matches the range of numbers that exist within the average global CO2 level. We have years, and so the data point at each spot corresponds to the 2 variables that you see over here under columns A and B. Now, this is where things get a little more complicated. We still want to look at the relationship. We're interested in the relationship between the year and the CO2 level, but we're also interested in the relationship between CO2 level and average temperature. So now we need to import average temperature into the same graph. So back over to chart area, right click, select data, and so you see here again, this is the x-axis, this is the y-axis. You can have as many data sets, well really you can have 2, any more than that and it starts getting confusing. For our purposes we're going to have 2, so we're going to add another data set. This first part, it says what is the name of the data set that you want to use. So series name. So all I'm going to do, I'm not going to type anything into here. I'm just going to come over. I'm going to click on what the name of that data set is, and it's average global temperature. I click on that. Now average global temperature doesn't show up in this box, but when we import it, it will know what it is. We come down to series value. You highlight series value. You come back over here. You highlight the data that you want in the series. So again, here's the series, here's the name of the data, and here's the data. Click OK. Click OK. So now what we have is the original graph that we first started talking about in class. this is a graph that is completely accurate. The data is being represented in a very true fashion. So this is not like the pirate graph that we talked about before that had false data or that showed data that had no relationship. The data that we're looking at has a relationship. The problem now is the problem of scale. As you look here, all of these numbers range from 13.6 to 14.4, so they don't even change by 1 degree. And so when you look at this line right here, the average global temperature line, it looks completely flat. That's because you've got a scale of 0 to 50 and it's not moving at all within that 0 to 50 context. Our average global CO2 level, that line ranges from 260 all the way to 370. And so because it does range in that broad manner, you're going to see some change. So the scale here isn't bad. It's not perfect, but it's not as bad as this scale. This scale is horrible. This scale shows us that there's absolutely no change in temperature, which is not the case. So we still need to tweak things a little bit. So back into chart area, right click. You're going to go down to select data. And right now we're just going to use this as a checking point to make sure we know what's here. We've got average CO2, average temperature. Those are on the y-axis. On the x-axis, we've got our years all the way up to 2000, all the way back to 1850, so we're okay there. So click once on the chart area, and then I want you to move up. See here it says Chart Tools. The Chart Tools, these are tools you can use to change your graph. What we want to do is not design, it's not layout, although we'll come back to layout a little bit later. What we want to do right now is format. So click Format once, and you have a new toolbar that pops up right here. What we're going to do is we're going to come over here to Current Selection and to Chart Area. These are all the different areas of the chart that you have the opportunity to change and to move around. And so the one that we want to change, the one that we said was wrong, was the average global temperature. So we're going to click on that. And you see right here it highlights it. So this is how Excel is telling you that the portion of the graph that you're going to change is the portion that's highlighted. So we go to Format Selection, Series Options. It pops up for you. The primary axis, I'm going to move that out of the way. The primary axis is the axis that you would traditionally use along the y-axis. The secondary axis is an axis that you only use when you've got two variables that have extremely different data sets like we do. So we're going to pull this back over into view. The secondary axis is what we'll use. We'll close that. So now we have a data set that's being represented. Our blue line, our temperature line, is being represented on the secondary axis. Our red line, our CO2 line, is being represented on our primary y-axis. So we're in better shape now than we were, but we've still got a few things missing. We don't have a title for our graph. We don't have labels for the axes. And the scales for these are not as good as they could be. So let's start with our primary y-axis. If you double-click there, if you single-click it, the box will highlight. Right-click once, move down to Format Axis, and click that. Axis options, minor, major, or minor maximum and major unit. This refers to these numbers. So if you see, it automatically selected 0 as the primary, which is normal, and it automatically inputted a number greater than our greatest number. Our greatest number is 370. Well, it took 400. We want to fix that a little bit, so we're gonna move those to fixed, and we're going to change them. I'm going to start by changing the minor axis for our CO2. The lowest number is 265, so I can safely make the new low number 250 because there's no red data, there's no CO2 data below 250. 400 is still good for the top. I'm going to change this so that instead of going up by 50s, it goes up by 20s. And so that's what our graph looks like now by changing just the primary y-axis. Now we can do the same thing over here to the secondary. Click once on the secondary axis, right click, move down to Format Axis, and the same thing comes up. We want to change the maximum and the minimum and the major unit. And again, the major unit is the amount that it increases by. So right now it's increasing by 0.2. Maybe we're going to change that to 0.1. And when we look at our data set, 13.6 is the lowest number, so we can safely change that to 13.5. Our highest number is 14.4, so we can also change that to 14.5 without losing any data. We hit close, and so now we've got our scales for everything look good. All right, so the scales are in good shape. The problem is we still don't know. If you don't have this original data set next to you, you don't know what this is. Okay, so we're going to come back up here to our chart tools. We're going to click on layout, and now we've got a bunch of different things. The legend is what you see here, and the legend looks good. The red line is CO2, the blue line is temperature. I have no problem with that. But the chart title is missing completely, so we're going to click on chart title. You can have no chart title, which you already know that a graph must have a title. A centered overlay title, that's just telling you where it goes. And then above the chart, we're going to choose above the chart, so it's going to pop it right in. Click right inside there, highlight it, and we're going to label our chart carbon dioxide and temperature. We could get much more specific than that, but that explains what it is that we're looking at. So there's the chart title. Now the axes titles. We've got 3 axes. The primary horizontal. So again, the primary horizontal is our x-axis that runs along the bottom, and we want one below that. And the title there can simply be year. We come back up to axes titles. The primary vertical. Again, the primary vertical is the y-axis that we normally use when we graph only 2 variables. We want a rotated title so that it'll be sideways in the graph. And sometimes if you're having a hard time typing within there sideways, you can come here and type this way. This is carbon dioxide levels. And it's always important to include a unit when it's applicable. And our unit is parts per million, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. All right, one more axis to cover. That's the secondary vertical axis, which again, let's get out of here. This is our secondary vertical. So secondary vertical, again, the rotated title. And this is degrees Celsius. Pops it in. So here are the bottom lines in terms of graphing. You must always have a title. You must always have labeled axes. If you have data points that are different, you need to have a legend that explains what they are. In terms of looking at why this graph is better than this graph, that's a question of scale. In terms of asking why this graph is better than the original graph, sorry, that's not the one we had originally. In terms of why this graph is better than the graph that we originally looked at in class that showed global temperature being a flat line straight across, that's because our scale was 0 to 50, and we weren't allowing the diversity of temperature to really show up. We talked earlier about the relationship between variables, and in class we talked about the relationship between the number of pirates and global warming. We said that it was clear that the number of pirates and global warming were related according to the graph. And that is true according to the graph. The next thing we need to look at with these is whether there is a causal relationship, and by causal I mean cause and effect. Is there a causal relationship between the variables? And when we talked about pirates and global warming, we could come up with no legitimate reason for that for that relationship to exist. Although many of you tried very hard to find reasons for pirates to cause global warming, there is no reason for that to exist. In this case, as we've progressed through time, the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has increased. The amount or the temperature of the Earth has increased, and you can see these two lines are pretty well intertwined. And this is the beginning of our discussion on global warming. This is the beginning of our discussion on the relationship between human activity and climate change. I hope you are able to complete the work on this graph. Please email me the completed graph. I don't need the data set over here. You can copy. So if you right click, you can copy this, and then you can paste it into a Word file and email it to me. Or you can put it on a memory stick and bring it to school and log on to a computer and put it in my Dropbox. That would be fine too. And then the other thing you need to make sure you do is complete the questions that accompanied the data set on the worksheet. So I hope this worked out for you. If it didn't, let me know. I'm always willing to try new technology, and I hope you become more willing to try that stuff as well. Take care and have a good day. And remember, make good decisions, be safe, and stay out of trouble.